Hello and welcome to episode 6 of Pulumi for IT Pros. This week we're going to have a look at stack outputs, so how we can get data out of our deployment and even use it in other deployments or for other purposes. So let's take a look at how we do that and why you would want to use them, and we'll see a few examples in our demos. So we're back in VS Code. This is the code that we used last week. So nothing new here. We're creating our resource group. We're looping through and creating some storage accounts and so on. So at the moment, when we run Pulumi up, there's no outputs on this. It creates the resources and it finishes, and that's fine. It does the job. But we want to add some outputs into this for a couple of reasons. The first thing we're going to look at is how they can be used from the command line or from the stack. And then we're going to have a look at how you can actually use these outputs in a different Pulumi set of infrastructure. So how you can chain infrastructure together. And that's a really good practice to follow to try and keep your infrastructure deployments relatively small and contained, to reduce what's called your blast area, to limit the amount of damage you can do with a single deployment gone wrong. So it's good practice to try and cut down your deployments into small chunks and then chain them together. And one of the ways we can do this is with outputs. So what we're going to do is we are going to export a couple of things. The first thing we're going to export is the resource group name. So we've created the resource group in this stack. Let's say we wanted to add some things later in a different deployment. We're going to need to know the name of the resource group. We want to put them in the same resource group. So to add an output, we're going to use the pulumi.export command. And this varies differently between different language types. So in Python, we use pulumi.export. In C#, you actually declare them as output objects. In TypeScript, you use the export command. So it is language specific to some extent, but you'll get the principle. So the pulumi.export command, and then what you need to pass in is the name of the output you want to create. We call it resource group name, and then the value. And this is going to be rg.name to get it from that resource group that exists. So that's one thing. Now, we're creating several storage accounts in this infrastructure. If you remember, we've actually got two sets of storage accounts. We're doing some loops here, and we're doing a for in loop, and then we've got for each one down here in the storage list. So I want to get an output that gives me a list of all the IDs of the storage accounts that I've created. So we're going to need to put them all in a list first. So we're going to create a list here. We're going to call it storage account ID list, and we're going to make that an empty list. Then at the end of it, after each loop, we're going to add this storage account. So we're going to do storage ID list dot append. Just add the value to that list, and then we want to pass in the storage account in this loop, and we want the ID. We want the full ID. So you can see, because this is tabbed in, it's still part of this for loop. So it will go every time we create a storage account, it will put it in this variable temporarily. This variable we will then use to access it, to put it in the ID in the list, and then we'll loop again, and storage will get replaced with the next one, and so on. We want to also add them from this second loop we're doing down here. So we want a list of all the names. So we're going to do the same thing. And in fact, we can just copy and paste that. So let's just do that. Let's just take that. It's the same value. Again, inside the same for loop, because we're tabbed in there. And we've got that list now populated with those IDs. So now we want to export it. So we can just do this, and we're going to call this storage account ID list. Let's just call it storage accounts to differentiate it. And we're going to then put the value in there of that item there. Now, you can see there's a slight difference here. So resource group.name is effectively a string, whereas this is a list. You can put them into outputs. Effectively, what outputs are just JSON. So as long as you can represent the thing as JSON, it will get serialized into JSON and exported for you. One thing to be aware of, though, is that these are all going to be exported in plain text. So you generally don't want to put secrets into your exports. There are other ways we can deal with this by putting things into Key Vault and so on, but generally you don't want to do that. You could also export just a name to help find it later and those sort of things, the name of your secret, but you generally avoid putting actual secrets in here because you'll see them in the command line as plain text. So now we've done that, let's go back over to the command line and have a look what that actually looks like. Let's zoom in a little bit. So if we just do run Pulumi up, and it will actually see when we run the preview that this should already have calculated the exports for us. Yeah, so you can see here, these are what it's going to add. It's going to add these outputs to the stack. So this is our resource group name and these are our storage account name. Now, at this point, it's able to tell you what those are going to be because all of those resources had already been created. It's not doing anything new, so it can tell you exactly what your outputs are going to be. In a scenario where we were doing this from scratch and we hadn't deployed anything yet, these values would probably not be populated or would show placeholder values because of the fact that they hadn't been created yet. It doesn't know what they are. When you actually get to the actual running it, it would then show you the correct values. So at this point, although it's showing me them in the preview here, these outputs haven't actually been created, so they don't exist in the stack. So if I wanted to use them elsewhere, I still have to go through the process of running this just to create the outputs. So let's do that. And this should be very quick. There you go, because it's just adding them to the stack file. It's not actually creating any resources. So you can see again, it's just confirm what they are. And we can also, if we ever want to look at the outputs of a stack later, we can always use the Pulumi stack outputs command. I believe output is the command we want. And that will show us the outputs for the current stack. So you can see them here as well, the same values that we've got there. So this is useful by itself, just if you want to be able to see the command line that you want to be able to see what happened in a stack, or potentially even if you wanted other things to interact with your infrastructure code. So if maybe you want to write some PowerShell or a bash script that takes the output of a stack and does something else with it, you can absolutely grab the stack output from here. And you can even format it for being more useful. So you can run with the -j command to get it as JSON. I mean, that should make it a bit more readable if you want to do that. There is also a -shell one as well to put it in. All right, simply dashes. No, it looks like that's not actually in there. The docs are lying to me. But yeah, will give you it in JSON format as well. The one thing I did notice here, there is a show secrets command as well. So let's just check on that. Okay, so I just want to check something on the secrets because I may actually have been mistaken when I mentioned earlier that outputs them as plain text, as long as I suspect it's so long as it knows that it is a secret. So what we're going to do is we are going to run Pulumi config set, and we're going to give it a secret, and we'll call it secret 1, and we'll call that secret value just for testing. So what that will do is that will add a value to our config file encrypted. And so if we go back to there, have a look at our config file. Yeah, so we've got our secret here, and that's encrypted. That's not the value I put in. You can see that there. So what we're going to go and do is if we do Pulumi.export, we call it secret, and the value is going to be config.require secret, and the name, what do we call it? Secret 1. And let's export that and let's see what actually happens. Go back to the command line. I'll run Pulumi up. And yeah, okay. So that's fine. So you can see that actually it will encrypt the secrets. What I said earlier was in fact incorrect. Let's just add that in there. Yeah, so if the item is marked as a secret, then it will not show you that. The reason I was slightly confused about that is when we did the original demo, if you remember, it had the output for the storage account key and it was showing that in plain text. But I think that is because that actually hadn't been marked as a secret. And so Pulumi didn't know it was a secret and was just a string, hence why it displayed that. So if we do now do Pulumi stack output, get rid of that. That should show us without the value. So secret, yeah, there is a show secrets, I think is the command. And you can see that shows the value. So you can get the secrets if you want to. So that is still something to bear in mind. You can actually decrypt those at the command line. If you don't want somebody to be able to do that, then you should make sure that you don't put those in the outputs effectively. Okay, so what I've done is I have gone and created a brand new project, another Python project, and you can see here this has got the default settings in it to demo creating a storage account. And what we want to do here is let's clean up a few things first. So let's get rid of all that exports. We're not interested in that. And at the moment, when you run this project, it will create a resource group and put the storage account in there. We don't want to create another resource group and get rid of that. We want to put this storage account in the resource group that we created in the other project. And so for that, we are going to need to know the actual name of that resource group. And that was one of our outputs. So to be able to reference that, what we're going to do is we're going to create what's called a stack reference. So we're going to call this project 1. It's the first project. And this is going to be a stack reference. And then in here, we need the name of the stack. So the stack is not the project, it's not the folder or anything like that. This is the actual stack that we deployed. And so you'll realize obviously the outputs are stored in the stack. And if you remember from the previous video, we actually have 2 stacks with our first project. We have a dev one and a test one. And so we are going to need to decide which one we want to import here. Now, it's very likely that we are going to have a dev and a test version of this project to work with the dev and the test version of the other project. So you would then make sure that's aligned when you come into here. So what we can do is we can add that to the config. So let's go over to the command line. And we're going to go do, are we in the right folder? Yep, so we do Pulumi config set, and then we'll call that project 1 stack name. And what we actually need there is the name of the stack. So actually, I'll see out that in a minute first. So if we do Pulumi stack ls, it will show us the stacks. And you can see the one we want here is IT Pro Dev to work with the dev stack. So if we go back here and we'll do Pulumi config set project 1 stack name, and the value is going to be IT Pro Dev. And I've got created this project 2 dev stack previously, so that's the one we're going to use for this. Okay, and so if we go back to our VS Code and look in our config file, you can see we've got the project 1 stack name set IT Pro Dev. We can obviously then create a test stack for this and have IT Pro Test and so on. So let's go ahead and use that. So the first thing we need to do is actually bring in the config so that we can consume it. So that's the same as we did with the other project. Let's do that here. Let's put that in there. Then we want to actually use that value. So if we do config.require and the name of that option there, which is the project 1 stack name. Oops. And there we go. So that gets us the stack reference. And what that is, it is effectively a reference to that stack file, so we can get the values of the outputs of that. So what we want to do is we're going to create a variable called resource group name, and the value is going to be project 1, and then it has this get output command, and then the name of the resource group. And that's the name of the actual output. Again, so if we can't remember what those are, we can do Pulumi stack outputs. And obviously that's the wrong stack because it's using the actual project 2 one. So if we do Pulumi stack output and then we use the stack value, that should give us, there we go. And we want resource group name. So back to VS Code, and we'll just stick that in there. And so now we can replace this value here with this resource group name property. And if we now go back to the command line, clear that, and we do Pulumi up, this should tell us it's going to create a new storage account, and it's going to do it in that resource group that we created previously. If we have a look at the details, and we have a look at the group name, where it is, there you go, resource group name, select to Pulumi for IT Pros. So you can see that's getting that value from the stack outputs. And actually you can see down here, it's pulled in all of the values from that. So you can see the other things that we're gonna be able to consume if we want to. So I'm going to go ahead and say no for a minute on that. So that's all very well if we actually just want to get that string value. But what if we wanted some additional information? So what if we wanted to know the location of that resource group? We're not publishing the resource group location as an output, so we don't have that available to us. And you can't really pass whole objects through the output so that you can press the JSON. But what you can do is you can recreate the Pulumi object as an existing object within our code here. And I'll show you what I mean. So over on the Pulumi doc site, this is the documentation for resource group. This is how we create a resource group. We've all seen this before. If we actually go up a level to the resources section, you can see you've got all these resources you can create. These are the resource section, but you've got this function section. And functions are like methods that you can do to do things other than creating resources. And in particular, there is a get resource group around here. And so you can use this command to get a resource group, and what you get out the end of it is a resource group object, or the object for a resource group where we can get the properties. So you can see here the method needs the resource group name. We've got that because that came from the output. So let's see what we can do with that. So if we create a variable and call that a resource group, and we want to get from the resources library, and we want get underscore resource group. And then the value in here, which is resource group name, which came from the stack outputs. So this now is a resource group. And so let's say we want to have a look at the storage account and we want to set the location. At the minute, it's putting it from the config file, but we want to explicitly make sure that it's in the same location as the resource group. Then we can do resource group, and you saw there, we've got all the properties that we'd expect to see from a resource group. It's as if that resource group was created within this project, but it's not. It's just a reference to the existing one. And we're going to use location. And missing a comment. There we go. And so that then should create the resource group in the same location, the storage account in the same location as the resource group. And let's go ahead and double check on the command line. We'll just do a Pulumi up. And that should show us that it wants to create it in that same location. So let's have a look at the details. And you can see the location is set to West Europe, which is the same location as the resource group, but you can see that information isn't in the outputs, but we've been able to go and actually look that up. So you can see the outputs combined with that sort of ability to go and create objects from existing resources that were created by Pulumi is really useful. And so you can use that functionality, the getting objects, to go and reference resources that already exist. And those resources don't even have to have been created with Pulumi. As long as you've got the details of those resources, you can go and look them up. Now, to be very clear, these are read-only objects. They let you go and get the details of an object that already exists. You can't change them using this method. If you wanted to change them, you'd have to import that into your Pulumi state, which we're going to look at how to do in the future, and make it part of your project. These are references. If you ever use Terraform, it's very similar to the data piece of that, where you can go and look up existing resources and use that. But it's a really useful piece if you want to be able to do it, go and grab existing stuff. But that's it. So that's how you can create outputs and how you can consume those outputs in other projects. You can see what we've done here is quite simple. It's just passing some strings around and some arrays. But you can see that you can use this as a very powerful means of actually just taking that data and passing it between projects and doing whatever you need to do to make sure that you can chain those various projects together. You can have, if you've got teams working together, you can have one team building something that creates outputs that are consumed by another team, effectively creating a type of interface. There's a lot of flexibility you can do if you build your projects to have a set of outputs and inputs that make them that kind of flexible solution. So hopefully you found that useful, and hopefully I'll see you for the next episode.